Okay. Alright, so I would say let's just get started.
Whenever you're ready, yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, good morning, everyone. Hope you're not too hungover today. Well, you're here, so clearly not. Alright, so this session is going to be a bit more like hands-on. We've had lots of talks yesterday, right? So lots of sitting Q&A and stuff like that. Today, most of the content is going to be us kind of like messing around with some ideas. So this session is called Cryptohistorical Globalization. And the main basis for this, like feel free to join a group, is kind of the distinction between like cryptopia and cryptohistory, right? So a lot of the stuff around like crypto and blockchain is very like utopian, right? It's about like blockchain is going to change the world. We're going to have like hack-proof elections. We're going to have like a perfect financial system, and like there's manifestos and ICOs coming out like every other week. But then there's like what actually happens, right? And that's what today's a bit more about. So as an example, right, like we have the grand like white paper that started it all, right? But there are lots of historical factors behind that, right? Like crypto technology was starting to like mature, like I guess the blockchain made that happen. But it was also like this global backdrop of like late capitalism, financial crisis, and like Occupy that created the basis for that. Right, so history usually happens as a confluence of these different forces coming together at the right time. Right, so today is going to be a bit about unpacking some of that. One more example, right? Like who doesn't want to like trade everything freely, right? And then in reality, kind of see this kind of stuff happen, right? So how many of you heard about the Sierra Leone kind of like grand story that's going around? Blockchain elections. So the big story was basically like first blockchain-powered election in the world, right? Sierra Leone, this happened just a few months ago. And then like it subsequently came out that they didn't really use blockchain for anything. What happened was that one of the companies, that was a kind of like, I think a tech company that was part of the observers that had signed up to like help observe the elections, used blockchain for like one part of their data capture on their end, nothing to do with the company at all, right? So a lot of, like in any technology space, a lot of the stuff around like smart cities, a lot of that's really like that company like hype versus actual historical implementation, right? So unpacking a bit of that. So what does it say? Yeah, so none of the people in Sierra Leone had any idea that there was anything close to blockchain involved in this, and yet this was flying around and like probably impacted some of the blockchain investments that happened, you know. All right, so broadly, it's about kind of like manifestos versus actual outcomes, and the idea of the Rorschach plot of, you know, like we're going to be taking more of a psychologist kind of view to it, instead of saying like, let's take it for what it is. What does this tell us about what people are envisioning, but also like what really happens when prototype enters reality. So I had this quote when doing some research for this that I came across, and this idea of like money as a consensual hallucination, which is kind of what we've been hearing about, right? Like, is this shared kind of like reality structure that we agree upon arbitrarily because it helps us to do stuff? So many versions of this we could do it, but the perspective we're going to take today is actually that like if we're all psychoanalysts, right? Like consensual hallucination is the best place to start because it gives you a great entry point into like what people are actually thinking and envisioning and wanting. All right, so that's kind of the setup, right? We're going to look at kind of sort of crypto historical events and begin to like sort of like create some stuff out of them. So the way we're going to do this is that we have about 4 groups already, right? We're going to spend about 15 minutes on 3 exercises in series. The first is just kind of coming up with some crypto historical events. This could be observations, so it could be anything from, oh, like the launch of Ethereum, this happened, you guys probably were involved in some of them, right? So it could be an event that's first-hand. After we do that, right, each group will end up with like maybe half a dozen to a dozen kinds of like events. You can make them a timeline if you like. Then each group will kind of then say, okay, so based on these events, what are some of the hypotheses or like explanations that we could infer out of that, right? Are these events driven by, for example, is the crypto boom driven by capital flight from countries that had lots of restrictions? What would this look like? So you come up with maybe a few hypotheses from this, right? We'll try and like do some forced fitting, right? Not scientifically rigorous, right? But today's not about scientific historical rigor, we have an hour. It's about more like speculative fun, right? So think more improv than historian, right? What if this was true? What if capital flight was behind all of these things, including Silk Road? What would happen then, right? What would that mean? And then once we have a few kind of like crazy theories, we'll actually go to a bit more scenario building, right? So this is kind of like the more science fiction, crazy design fiction kind of end of it, where from the scenarios we have, we'll try and imagine if we extrapolate this 6 months, 18 months, 3 years, what kind of crazy world is that, right? If the first people to adopt any of this crypto technology are going to be like somewhere between NSA and like Russia KGB, right? What world does that result in? And the scenarios you come up in, each group will kind of like, you can brainstorm quite a few of them, and then you'll pick one, and then you'll kind of like think about a way to like present it. You could be doing a fake news report up here, you could be acting it out, you could be, you know, let your imagination run wild with that. Cool? Sort of makes sense? Okay, so I'm going to start passing out some of these like sticky notes and stuff. I have a handful for each table. So for the first set of exercises, so yellow and orange, maybe like a few for each table.
Yep.
You want to come up with about like 7 to 13 events. Here, these short piece groups as well. You can write down a lot more if you like at first, and then you can like narrow it down. But you want to get to eventually just like 7 to 13. Yep. So that you don't want too many, because once you have too many, then it becomes like, oh, I'm just reading the post-it instead of understanding the context. What you want is to have like maybe like 6 events that everybody at the group kind of knows what they're about. They have some context. So it'll be kind of, once you write them down, you want to share with each other what some of the background is, so that you all have this shared timeline of this.
Is it one event per sticky note, or is it just all the events on there?
I would suggest one per sticky note, because then if you write a few down, then you can choose the ones you want, right? So, and then, so what you want to do with this is to make sure you don't like add too much causality into this, right? So you can add context about Satoshi's thing came out around the time of the financial crisis, but you want to say it's because of that, because that comes in the next section, right? So just observations, ideally something objective. So instead of like, oh, this thing, Ethereum happened and it's going to change the world, right? Vitalik writes his white paper and people do this. So keep it on that level. And then the kind of like hat you want on at this stage is kind of like the, that's interesting hunter. So you're kind of like the cool hunter looking for interesting events. We're not getting to like analysis and stuff yet. Just like, what are 6 to 12 interesting events that really happen in crypto history that you want to write about? Cool. Any questions? So I suggest that instead of starting to talk right away, like take a few minutes for people to like write down a few seed ideas first, and then once you guys feel like you're stocked, you can begin to start discussing them. Right? I'll think again about 10 minutes.
Awesome.
I think I actually have it. There you go.
Awesome. Thanks, sir. The only obvious ones.
What's up, calling pizza?
Thank you. There you go.
Bit Connect conference.
Now, go on.
I'm gonna name you should check it out.
Yeah.
It's like a great
Yeah. I think that doesn't necessarily like trying to do this.
Okay, so
Do whatever you
yeah,
want. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, just do like random things. Like go like evolution.
Ethereum forks using that because of some range.
Segways to it.
You on our team? You
Uh,
gotta recruit you.
cloning. I have to add a couple too or something to like, you guys are all good start. Or run off post-its.
Web3 next.
Ethereum Classic.
Yeah, hardcore. Nice. Yeah. Cool. We do any more here. Yeah, what was it, 713?
Yeah. What else happened?
They say free cards.
That is a good one.
Yeah.
Decaying.
Yeah, toxic waste.
Way they explode.
Yeah. Kind of iffy. Like I feel like especially when you get Starks now, you don't need a trusted setup, which I like think that was a pretty interesting thing.
Oh, you must be cyber cash and then.
Even to pay out, cyber cash was something for.
What was the one? The one that was the stupid policy.
There were two
That was the stupidest policy. I was like, there was a stupid policy that blew up. I forget what it was. Yeah, we already had that.
They were trying to make it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, China bans crypto.
And cyber cash.
How many? Which time?
It's a recurring one.
Right?
Yeah, they know what it
Right.
is.
So they bought that.
Yeah.
But it was kind of weird how they did it. It's like
Yeah.
What can we do with all these?
Should we like just order them?
Yeah, order them in chronological order.
So BitGo. And I think that I think Mt. Gox is probably the next that happened.
Yeah, that sounds right.
They said same as
And
FPGA.
then the Ethereum hardcore, maybe.
Yeah, hard fork was that.
IPFS and Web3.
Sound about right
Yeah,
there.
right enough.
This is late, that's like that's
Ecash there.
What was Cyclids?
Sega was recent. That
Second was the summer after Zcash. It was like last summer.
Last summer. I think it was probably, was that before or after CryptoKitties? I think it was after
No, CryptoKitties was in the fall.
Yeah.
That was like in November.
Yeah.
Big Connect conference.
That was like in the summer, like at the same time as.
For Domino, we've been sort of going for a while.
They're like probably like a year.
Yeah, holding on somewhere around there.
China Advanced Crypto. We should make like 8 sticky notes of China Advanced Crypto.
Sort of before CryptoKitties, I think it was like in September or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what is like a chain of chains. Because kind of like, sort of like related to CryptoKitties.
Hey, how many of these?
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to be able to put a smart contract.
Yeah, well, I'm going to do all the same. So I think I finished these. I've actually
It's like,
If you guys need more sticky notes, I have some more.
Yeah.
I heard about that one connective plasma on Ethereum.
yeah.
But that's Ethereum only, so Polkadot, you would, I assume they want other blockchains completely, yeah.
Right, completely different. Yeah, and then plasma is like breaking the Ethereum chain. This one is similar because if you break it into shards and then you know, I guess every
No,
shard.
Plasma is different. Sharding is you break the main Ethereum chain into shards. Plasma chains are sort of, they can branch out to any shard. They're sort of like, kind of like lightning. So where they're like these more closer to a channel.
Plasma chains you like lock up wallets, but instead of locking them up to a multi-sig wallet through Lightning, you essentially create another chain where you can go up at any point. But you can kind of interact on this, so you can make all these child chains that each have like 7 or 8 or 10 transactions per second. Plasma's interesting. Plasma is
Yeah. So sharding you can do that, And Plasma you can do much more transactions per second.
no, but each individual plasma chain filled with 10, and you can make a whole bunch.
Is that true? Because I read that you could implement the Plasma chain and have a smaller set of validators, kind of like the POS on it. And that you could have a higher throughput on the Plasma chains.
My understanding was the child chains, the benefit was that you could have these smaller chains that have the security of the main chain, and they still have the same technical limitations, but then once you implement sharding, you can further input, increase transactional throughput. That's my
I thought it was the other way around. Because sharding is the main Ethereum chain, so you're just still trading Ether on the main chain. It's just there are many that happen in parallel. And Plasma chain is like I thought you could sort of set. I thought you had like more flexibility in the constraints on the Plasma chain, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I would say not. The one thing, if you want to know more information about this, Bitcoin Center. I don't listen regularly, but they had an Ethereum researcher on maybe 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, that was good.
Plasma. And Plasma is the one which will be implemented most soon. Yeah, Plasma is interesting. I think.
Maybe it's like
But sharding is just that you have, say like right now you have like one Ethereum chain, right? Sharding is you can split it up in many chains, and if you have like a miner or a proof of stake, you validate blocks on every single chain. But these are all part of the Ethereum main chain, so they can all talk to each other. And it's just that if you want to, and there's many different ways you can implement it. You can sort of say that like all the accounts with that start with 0x1 are on this shard and starts with 0x2 are on this shard and so on. Or you can go randomly where like every new block, like you just have like your pool of transactions and then a bunch of validators for each chain. Or miners.
The idea is to get away from every validator validating everything.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm fairly certain that it improves the transactional group.
Yes, exactly. So you can get many more, right? Yes. So, yeah, so for sure.
Sharding.
Yeah.
All right, guys, just 1 second. So we're about halfway through the 15 minutes. Where you want to get to eventually is kind of like a selected timeline of your event. Right, so most of you have more than the suggested amount. That's okay. That's a good starting point. You want to get down to about like 7 to 13, so like something that's kind of there and also in sequence, because that's going to help you as a starting point for your analysis. Next one.
I feel like everyone will have that.
No, I agree. I don't think it's
I don't know. 9, 10, 11, 12. So we need to remove like 5 here.
I said 7 to 13.
Oh, 7.
See.
Just the trend that factors are raising so much money that they now have funds where they're like, we're investing in not like trying to like support the Bitcoin was there.
Bitcoin was this Ponzi scheme, which was essentially they said it was
video.
So here's
yeah,
it's the most over the top thing. Basically, Bitconnect claimed that they were doing algorithmic trading, and if you gave them money, they would give you back like 5% every day. And you could also, if you recruit people, they would give you also back. And like literally, everyone's like, it's a Ponzi scheme. They're like, somewhere around. They're using bots to trade and making all this money. It's like, if you invested like $10,000 and you held it there for 3 years, you had click on that. They're all the same. That's the same guy. Yes. So this meme is this guy. This is like peak of the insanity, euphoria. Like this is when everything was just like so. This is exactly what you should have sold. Yeah. If you turn up the volume here, it's atomic clock, like military. Oh, this is like a joke video, so this is something else. Just skip ahead. This isn't the actual conference. I think that
There were a couple.
it doesn't. You'll find the part.
Atomic time is part of our
So Bitcoin was a Ponzi scheme. It was actually not big. It was a fucking 20-second market cap, and it was very clearly a Ponzi scheme. But people wanted to believe, and this is when the market was growing. And this guy had this conference. We're just trying to get everyone into it. How it's going to be. Like you might do, but like
Yes. It looks